Have you ever noticed how two people can look at the exact same situation, literally at the exact same time, and somehow walk away seeing two completely different realities? It's kind of wild when you think about it. How is that even possible? Well, today we're unpacking a fascinating scriptural source text to explore a couple of extraordinary historical accounts that are really going to challenge our fundamental understanding of reality and, honestly, how we perceive the massive obstacles right in front of us. Welcome to The Explainer. Let's dive in.
Picture this. You're faced with a crisis. One person looks at it and sees a closed door, just a total dead end. But another person looks at that exact same door and sees God working behind the scenes. Or one person looks up and sees a terrifying, insurmountable giant. The other person looks at that same giant but sees a giant God who completely dwarfs the threat. Now, the difference here isn't what these people are physically looking at. The facts are identical. The actual difference is the eyes they're using to look. So today, we're going to break down these two totally different paradigms of perception, the eyes of the flesh versus the eyes of the spirit. And we're going to do this by walking through two incredibly dramatic narratives from the source material that show exactly what happens when these two completely different ways of seeing violently collide. Now, before we get into the stories, we need to understand what the text means when it says the eyes of the flesh. These are simply the eyes we're all born with. They are biologically wired to just see what's physical, what's visible, and what is immediately right in front of us. And the text makes it really clear that on their own, these eyes aren't inherently evil or bad. They're just incredibly limited. Why? Because they can only report what the natural physical world shows them. They give you the raw data, but they completely lack the deeper context.
All right, let's look at our first narrative from Numbers chapter 13. Imagine you're trekking through hostile, unknown territory. 12 spies are sent on a high-stakes reconnaissance mission into the Promised Land. They travel through the whole region together. They all witness the exact same physical realities: towering fortified walls, massive cities, and literal giants walking the land. Every single one of them possessed the exact same physical data.
But here's where it gets crazy. Despite sharing the exact same journey, the results were drastically split. 10 of those men returned completely dominated by their natural vision, just paralyzed by impossible odds. They let their biological vision dictate their entire reality. But 2 of them, they didn't. So you have this massive majority who saw inescapable defeat versus a tiny minority of 2 who looked at the exact same thing and saw a distinct opportunity.
You can actually hear the sheer panic in the report of the 10 spies. They declared, "We can't do this. We are like grasshoppers in our own sight." I mean, wow. This is the textbook response of the natural eye doing the talking when faced with a giant. The natural eyes assess the physical height of the walls, they calculate the physical size of the enemies, and boom, they immediately output inescapable doom. But then, in total defiance of all that panic, 2 spies, Joshua and Caleb, gave a completely different report. Remember, they didn't visit some other, easier part of the land. They looked at the exact same physical threat. But they boldly declared, "We are well able to overcome it." How? Because they weren't just seen with their physical eyes. They were seen with their faith. They essentially factored an unseen reality into the physical equation.
And that right there brings us to the definition of the eyes of the Spirit. As the text references in 2 Corinthians 4:18, we're told to look not at the things which are seen, but at the things which are not seen, because the visible things are temporary, but the unseen things are eternal. Now, having the eyes of the Spirit doesn't mean you just blindly deny what's standing right in front of you. Joshua and Caleb knew the giants were real, but it means you absolutely refuse to let that physical reality be the final word.
Okay, to really see how this works in an absolute crisis, let's jump over to the prophet Elisha in 2 Kings chapter 6. Imagine waking up in the early morning light, stepping out of your front door and realizing you are hopelessly trapped. Overnight, a massive, heavily armed enemy force has completely surrounded your home. They are there to capture you, and there is seemingly no way out. You can almost feel the suffocating dread coming from Elisha's servant as he cries out, "What shall we do?" I mean, his eyes of the flesh are functioning perfectly, right? He sees the swords, he sees the chariots, he calculates the sheer numbers, and the only logical conclusion his natural eyes can give him is absolute destruction.
But Elisha, who is standing right next to him, doesn't even flinch. And what's fascinating is what he does next. He doesn't pray for an earthquake. He doesn't pray for a heavenly rescue squad or for the enemy army to just pack up and leave. He prays for something entirely different, a shift in his servant's vision. He simply prays, "Lord, open his eyes that he may see."
Suddenly, the servant's vision shifts. He looks past the hostile troops
and his eyes are open to this staggering unseen reality that was actively protecting them the entire time. The text says the surrounding mountains were completely ablaze with horses and chariots afire.
And this is the massive aha moment of the whole text. Absolutely nothing in the physical threat changed, not a single thing. The enemy soldiers were still standing right there, their weapons were still drawn, but everything was suddenly completely different for the servant, entirely because of how the situation was perceived. That unseen reality dramatically overpowered the visible threat.
So, you might be asking, how does the text say we actually apply this? Well, the source material makes a really crucial distinction here. This is not about forcing positive feelings or trying to use sheer willpower to ignore a problem. According to Ephesians 1:18, this enlightened perspective is gained through a spiritual connection. It describes the eyes of your understanding being enlightened. It's explicitly framed as something God opens for you, not some mental framework you can just independently build by trying harder to be an optimist.
So for anyone reading this who is facing their own giant-sized obstacles right now, maybe it's a closed door, a massive delay in your life, or a battle that just looks way too big to fight, the text essentially offers Elisha's blueprint. Step 1, face the reality of the situation. Don't ignore it. Step 2, pray that simple prayer the servant needed. Lord, open my eyes. And step 3, realize the deeper truth, that you are not alone and you are never without unseen help.
Which brings us to a really tough core question that the text poses to anyone facing a crisis. Which eyes have you been using to assess your own situation? Seriously, think about it. Are you only looking at the raw data the natural world is feeding you?
Because at the end of the day, your natural vision is always going to magnify the problem. It's going to highlight the giant, the army, the walls. But the text argues that spiritual vision will always magnify the solution. It shifts your focus to show you the one who is infinitely bigger than whatever giant happens to be standing in your way.
The source text leaves us with this incredible, provocative challenge to choose today to stop staring only at the visible giants, to start actively seeking that unseen reality that literally changes everything without altering a single physical fact. What unseen realities might you be missing right now? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Be sure to follow for more insights, and I'll see you next time.